Rob, how are you? Looking very smart.
I am at work this afternoon over in Manchester. It's very sunny, and I'm in one of the boardrooms at the legal firms that we work with. So, thought about put a jacket on and at least fit in somehow.
Very nice. Well, it seems like it's been a while since we spoke. I think we worked out
Mm.
earlier that a number of extraordinary things have happened since we last spoke. Crystal Palace have won a trophy. Spurs
Yep.
have won a trophy.
Yep.
Manchester United haven't won a trophy.
No need to rub it in.
Yes, there's so much going on in the world of sport, and the Club World Cup obviously is coming up and attracting a lot of headlines. Most of them for the wrong reasons for FIFA. But I think we're in danger, aren't we, of looking at this from a kind of European prism and
Mm.
thinking, Chelsea, Man City, Bayern Munich. They've quite frankly got better things to do, and any money they win in the Club World Cup is frankly inconsequential. It's nice to have, but they don't need it. But I think if you look at the other clubs in the tournament, this is massive, isn't it? For those clubs, like Al Hilal, maybe not actually, but the Urawa Red Diamonds, Mamelodi Sundowns, Auckland. These are clubs where this kind of cash doesn't come along very often.
It doesn't come along often, and it's transformational, isn't it? So, even if they are earning 30, $40 million, that could arguably be two, three, four, five times their annual revenue budget. So it's hugely important to them. Let's not dismiss the importance to the European clubs, because the injection of the money that they will earn through that Club World Cup will, of course, help them with their PSR compliance if they're playing in the Premier League or UEFA's financial sustainability regs across European competitions. But as a proportion of their revenue, of course, it is much smaller, as you infer. But for those other teams, some of those sort of smaller teams from emerging nations or perhaps tier two footballing nations, transformation will happen for them both on and off the field. So on the field, they will be able to, off the field, they will be able to perhaps bring in new transfers and then improve their domestic performance. On the field, their players are now going to be in the shop window of the world. So the opportunity for them then to move into one of the top tier leagues improves, which of course then has a double benefit to the club that they're currently participating in. So it's a hugely important tournament for, I think, the globalization and development of football, which ultimately, let's be honest, is what FIFA's mandate is, albeit we kind of have this very heavy Western focus, don't we, with teams either playing in Western Europe or indeed parts of the Americas.
Yeah, and I think FIFA have made it clear, haven't they, that they see this as another opportunity to bring the game to the world and effectively do what the International World Cup does for national teams, and transferring that to the club game. I've seen a lot of people suggest that the tournament is bloated and it would be much better if you just had 16 teams that have won their own leagues, but then that in itself brings up an issue as to how you select which leagues or which trophy victories count towards qualification, don't they?
Yeah, and for me, when you're looking at global or world sport, you want to see teams and individual athletes from different nations compete, and that's why we love the Olympics, isn't it? So that we can see, an athlete from a country who we probably can't pronounce the name of actually participating and mixing up with some of those leading athletes in the world that are extraordinarily well funded, and that kind of David versus Goliath type mentality, which is ultimately what attracts eyes on screens and bums on seats, as we say in the kind of broadcasting world. The challenge, of course, when you extend a competition like FIFA have, whether you're talking about the extended World Cup or the Club World Cup, is that your competitive balance stretches, so the games become quite predictable in nature, and that then has a knock-on effect to the attractiveness of tickets. And we will hear a lot, as we have done already, about the fact that tickets are not being sold for all those games very easily, even though you've got some of the world's superstar players at the tournament. And ultimately, the ticket price will go down and down and down. And the last thing the broadcasters want are stadia with lots and lots of empty seats, because that looks awful on television, which then has a knock-on effect to broadcast rights, has a knock-on effect to sponsors and commercial partners. So we need to see these tournaments as almost like a wicked problem with so many different stakeholders, and it really needs balancing in terms of what's the optimized outcome for the athletes, the fans, the teams, the sponsors, the broadcasters, commercial partners, and so on. And that's really, really tricky. And I think this iteration of the Club World Cup will be found out a little bit, if you're asking me to look at my crystal ball and see what ends up happening.
Was this always inevitable? Is this, do you think, almost seen as FIFA as being a sort of test tournament, if you like? And do you think if it happens in 4 years' time, then it will happen in one of the countries that is going to host the World Cup the following year? Or do you think we might go to a process where, you know, it becomes open to countries to, you know, to put themselves forward as hosts?
Yeah, that's a good question. One I've been asked a couple of times in slightly different ways over the last week or so. The FIFA World Cup as a national federation tournament is attractive to fans that follow their international teams. So whether it's England versus Senegal, which we might come on to later, those teams have followings. So when you put a World Cup tournament on, you will get the migration of fans from various parts of the world that will travel to watch their teams play in the tournaments, regardless of how successful they might or might not be. So having an expanded FIFA World National Cup, I think, is less of a problem in terms of selling tickets in stadiums, doing all those broadcast rights deals, commercial revenues, and so on. The issue with the FIFA Club World Cup is you won't have that same migration of fans because you're in the off season for some of the teams in Europe. So, you know, take Man City for instance. I very much doubt that many Man City fans will travel to the States to watch their teams play. I think the Club World Cup is aimed at more local market access. So FIFA will be expecting Americans and those local demographics to go to the games that are situated in their towns and cities. And quite frankly, those local fans are not being attracted by the sort of games that are going on because of the size of some of the teams that are going to travel. And I think that's what's contributing to the ticket sales that they're now experiencing. So they operate in two very different markets. And I think, you know, as an acid test for a future national World Cup, you know, stadium design, security, all of that kind of flow of organising a major event, you know, you can say that's all the same. But there's a very, very big difference, I think, in the types of fans that will go and watch these games. So they're different competitions.
What would I mean, FIFA, you know, will tell you that they want to turn football into the global game that, you know, everyone in the world follows, and it's accessible to everyone. But they don't necessarily want the Mamelodi Sundowns against the Urawa Red Diamonds in the semi-finals. Do they? What would constitute a successful Club World Cup, do you think, for FIFA? Do they want a final involving Real Madrid, Chelsea, Man City or Bayern Munich?
A good question. I thought before you said FIFA, you were going to ask for the host country, i.e. the US, and I was going to say, well, it'd be great if Inter Miami got all the way through to the final and Messi got the headlines. I think from an organising federation's perspective, they will want to have a good spectacle, which has some of the world's best players playing in those latter stages. So naturally, you would look at those Western European teams as participating in that. You know, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid final would get people talking, wouldn't it? They've got big footprints in the States as well, so you would also get a fairly healthy fan engagement piece going on there. I think some of the English teams actually don't have the sort of followings that they really want over in the States. Chelsea probably in a better position than Man City in that context, but I think Bayern Munich and Real Madrid would probably be the ideal final scenario if you were really pushing FIFA on where they wanted to see the outcome of the competition.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because we've seen, since we last spoke, we've seen Manchester United go on an absolutely disastrous post-season tour to the Far East. I think we've all seen that footage of the bus parade, which even now just makes my toes curl up past my ears. Is this tournament actually potentially more valuable to Manchester City and Chelsea than any post-season or pre-season tour to the USA would be?
Without question. 5 times more important from a revenue perspective. You know, if they net off, you know, if a UK team is able to net off somewhere between 15 and 20 million from a pre-season tour, that is a good return on what they're doing. The Manchester United tour that you just described to Malaysia and to Hong Kong, I think generated them somewhere in the region of about 9 or 10 million, probably on the higher end of 10 once they've done all the endorsements and the activations. But ultimately, right, to answer your question, so the FIFA Club World Cup is way more valuable to Manchester City and Chelsea than any pre-season tour would be. Just want to come back on the Manchester United thing. Something I've been saying for a long time is you have an inextricable link between sporting and financial performance. And unfortunately for Manchester United, because their sporting performance has been so poor for so long, relatively speaking, albeit they've won a number of trophies in the last decade, because their sporting performance has been so poor, those big global fan bases start to dwindle because the teams that are successful, the Manchester Cities of this world, Liverpools of this world, start to pick up those newer generations of fans. So what we actually saw in Asia was Manchester United trading on historic sporting performance. So they got their fans that would have been there in the 2000s and in the latter stages of Sir Alex Ferguson's career. But as a result of their ongoing issues on a sporting performance basis, a lack of real engagement in that tour. And then, of course, it came off the back of a pretty disastrous season. So again, that was diminished. And, it was very much a financial exercise for Manchester United. I think the local market realised that as well. And that's why engagement was so poor.
Yeah, it was. Because 10 years ago, that would have been one of the most eagerly anticipated tours.
It would have been chaos. It would have been, off the plane, off the buses. They would have been You can still Google those images from when Manchester United used to tour Malaysia, China, Singapore, where it is just the most tribal, engaged, fanatical environment that you could ever expect as a player. Much more so than they get over in the UK, which has just dwindled as a result of their sporting performance. There were still fans there, of course there were, because Manchester United's footprint is enormous, but not anything like it would have been had they had a Premier League trophy to their name over the last couple of years, or indeed a Champions League one.
Would that surprise the Glazers and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, do you think?
I think it would have been a tangible manifestation, without being too academic about this, of how far they have fallen as a club. Because they have been able to sign decent broadcast deals, they have been able to sign decent commercial and sponsorship deals and front of shirt sponsor and sleeve sponsor and so on and so forth. But I've been saying for a long time, those deals have all been undervalued to what would have happened had they retained that level of sporting performance had under Sir Alex Ferguson. So a £90 million shirt sponsorship deal with Snapdragon really should have been 150 million if they'd have carried on their trajectory that they had under that great manager, Sir Alex Ferguson.
I suppose it's the kind of unique litmus test, isn't it? You turn up in a country, you say, right, here we are, and then everyone goes,
so what?
Yeah.
Hence the bus tour.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that Europa League success ultimately, didn't save Ange Postecoglou, who was summarily dismissed within weeks of Spurs winning their first trophy since 2008. Was it 2008? I think
it was, yeah.
And now we see Thomas Frank potentially moving from Brentford to Tottenham rumoured to be paying £10 million in compensation to his former employees. I did a TikTok this morning which compared that sum with the amount splurged by Chelsea, who I think spent £21 million bringing Graham Potter from Brighton.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bayern Munich paid 27 million. I think it was dollars. I'm not sure what the exchange rate was then. Probably not as good as it is now, to Leipzig to bring Nagelsmann to Munich. And then I think ultimately, if you extrapolate out the amount that Leicester then had to pay in compensation to Brendan Rodgers after they brought him to Celtic, it was something like 18 million, which makes Frank look a bit like a bargain at 10 million. But it's not great history, is it, of teams paying enormous amounts of compensation to other clubs?
It's a tough gig. Be interesting to see if the press really get hold of that sort of valuation, because the reality is he's coming from a mid-table-ish club up into a club that they believe is historic and has a lot of background. It's a big fee to pay for somebody. I think Manchester United paid about 10 million, didn't they, for Ruben Amorim from Sporting. There's a kind of ecosystem in its own right with regard to hiring and firing managers. It's a big call, really big call. But against a backdrop of a disastrous season for Tottenham Hotspur, it's the sort of action that I think Manchester United should probably have taken with Ten Hag last year, but elongated that process. And I think Amorim United would have been quite fortunate not to have been ousted this summer. Sorry for Ange Postecoglou, actually. I think he was a pretty good character, but also demonstrates the huge sums of money that you need to pay for the best talent. And the reality is, because some teams have been so dominant, Jurgen Klopp's at Liverpool, Pep Guardiola's at Manchester City, the number of elite managers that fit underneath that level are few and far between. So they're looking for good, proven Premier League quality, aren't they? Yeah. And also buying from a rival.
Yeah, and if you look at the number of games that Spurs and Man U lost, it's pretty amazing that they're not starting next season in the Championship.
My guys I work with here at BSI Executive Education, big City fans, so you can imagine what they say to me as a United fan. But Tony was expressing this morning, there was they do those league tables, the half league tables, so like from January the 1st. And I think Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur can count themselves quite lucky that they weren't relegated, actually.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my friends down here are Saints fans, and I think they'd pretty much given up on Premier League survival after 3 matches. It's a long season.
Tough gig for them. Yeah, really was.
At least they can look forward to playing Portsmouth next season, which the same can't be said of the Hampshire Constabulary, who will not be looking forward to that game.
I'll bet they won't. No.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rob.
My pleasure, Rich. Good to see you again. And sorry it was so long. I should say sunning myself in the desert, but I wasn't. I was working very hard in the desert, and I've had to have a couple of weeks off. So good to see you again.
You too.
A nice little box.
Rob, the sun is out. I think it's sunny in London this afternoon at Lord's. South Africa taking on Australia. Australia are struggling this morning, which is always nice to see. And the World Test
Thanks for spoiling it for me.
How important is the World Test Championship? Is it remotely relevant? And how will the ICC view it in terms of their own role in cricket's future?
Tough question to answer. So I'm not going to try and quantify it in economic or financial terms. I'm not even going to try and quantify it in broadcasting or ticket sales or sponsorship or all the usual stuff that you would expect me to say. I think it's important and relevant in the context of new competition formats are really important. We are growing tired, in general terms, as a population across the world, of seeing the same stuff happen again and again and again and again. I think it's really important that they do different competition formats, test new audiences, engage new customers, fans, supporters, call them what you want, and provide a different type of content for people to consume.
And we have seen, haven't we, that T20 has become the dominant format. It's the only format where a lot of countries make any money. I think the ECB ended up paying Zimbabwe 150,000 to as a kind of thank you for coming over and playing them in a one-off test when England had a window. I was listening to Test Match Special earlier where they were talking about a set fund which enables some kind of financial equality across all full member nations, so that no full member nation hosts a test series and loses money. That is that's the absolute minimum, isn't it?
Yes. But in the same context, I think any of these organisations, whether they're cricket clubs, rugby clubs, football clubs, or mainstream businesses, need to wash their face financially themselves. So I've always been a bit anti handouts and funding situations, because I think you should be able to earn your own revenue, and you earn your own revenue by providing products that people want to buy. There's a level of equality and try and level the playing field to improve competitive balance, of course, but I wonder whether bodies like the ICC should be supporting some of those developing nations or less wealthy nations much more so than they are some of the leading test nations like England, Australia, South Africa, and so on.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a microcosm of the debate we're having domestically, isn't it? Where you've got the county championship being played in front of relatively small crowds. Although, as we posted earlier in the month, there has been a significant uptick in county championship crowds at a lot of counties this season, most notably Surrey, Somerset, and Sussex, and Leicestershire as well, I think.
Yeah.
But it is still the T20 blast that brings in the majority of the money, and then you've got the 100. A lot of counties obviously have thrown a lot of or are waiting for a lot of money to arrive in their bank accounts from that competition. So in many ways, what's being played out internationally is exactly the same kind of debate that we're having domestically.
It is, and ultimately it all roots back to the financial resources that you've got at your disposal. So interestingly, the 100, I think a lot of the money that comes from those third-party investors that have invested in the 100 gets held by the ECB, and there will be covenants on what they can and can't use that money for. And one of the things I know cricket are really keen to make sure they don't do is go down the same route as football to a lesser extent, but certainly rugby union. When you get this big amount of investment for a competition of any description, it doesn't just simply go out into player wages. It's used to develop the infrastructure of the game itself, and be interesting to see how that all ends up over the next few years, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we spoke to Sean Jarvis, who's the CEO of Leicestershire, outgoing CEO of Leicestershire earlier in the year, who has worked with Huddersfield when they're in the Premier League, and he suggested that, if you have financial fair play in football, well, why on earth wouldn't you have it in cricket to ensure that those counties that have got access to that kind of money don't just go out and blow it within 2 years, bringing in players that bring loads of trophies, but actually don't make any kind of material difference to the sport itself.
Yeah, sad situation though, isn't it? When well-paid executives need a regulatory process to stop them from making emotionally driven decisions. If your organisation, your business doesn't generate more than it earns, then it goes bankrupt at some point. You will hire staff based on what you can afford to pay them. And I find that whole dichotomy in sport just really bizarre. And if regulation is the only way, fine. We should be regulating salary spend in every single sport that we participate in. But I think that the executives should be a little bit better than perhaps they're making out.
Are you suggesting, Rob, that football clubs should only spend what they earn?
Possibly.
That'll never catch on. Thanks, Rob.
Doesn't seem to be. Cheers, Rich.
Cheers.
You've hit record again.